Now, the Labour Party have started the year with their tails well and truly up. Keir Starmer is miles ahead in the polls. Boris Johnson doesn't know whether he'll still be Prime Minister by the end of this week. And last Wednesday saw the first defection by a sitting Conservative MP to Labour in almost 15 years. Who could have predicted any of this a year ago? I'm joined this morning by Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry. Emily, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Jack.
Emily, firstly, you'll no doubt have seen the story on the front page of the Sunday Times this morning that Conservative MP Nus Ghani says she was sacked as a minister in 2020 over what she says was described to her as her muslimness. What's your reaction sat there reading that story this morning?
My reaction is that I know Nus Ghani. I've worked with Nus Ghani and on the Uyghur genocide, and I have always found her to be a deeply serious and principled individual. So when she makes an allegation like this, I believe her. And I think crucially, what struck me was the idea of her being told that she should use her Muslimness, that she should use the fact that she's a Muslim woman to defend the Conservative Party against allegations of Islamophobia. And because she wasn't prepared to do that robustly enough, she lost her job. And that for me feeds into two things. One, which is this kind of whole culture of bullying, which we've been hearing all about from the whips in the Conservative Party for some time now. And the other thing, which we've been hearing about for even longer, is the way in which the Conservative Party just don't take Islamophobia in their midst seriously. I mean, they haven't paid any attention to Sajid Vazi's alarm call about and her recommendations about what they should do about Islamophobia in the Tory party. They've refused to hold an independent inquiry. In fact, they're not even prepared, Jack, to use the word Islamophobia. I mean, they call it Muslim hatred or something, and they're not prepared to use the same definition of Islamophobia as every other political party in this country. So, I mean, I think that it's a very important and disturbing story. And I have to say, I agree with Nadine Zahawi and Penny Mordaunt, who have come out this morning in support of Nus. And it's interesting to see that you have on the one side the potential leadership candidates doing that, and on the other side you've got the chief whip threatening to sue her.
Would you like to see some sort of independent inquiry into these allegations?
I'd like to see an independent inquiry into Islamophobia in the Tory party, in the same way that we quite rightly held an independent inquiry into the poison that is anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And we had an independent inquiry. We had great leadership from the leader of our party, who himself took it extremely seriously and took personal responsibility for it. And we also accepted an international definition of anti-Semitism. I mean, to be honest, we're leading the way on that. And I would suggest strongly to the Conservative Party that they did the same thing when it comes to Islamophobia.
Let's talk about your own party now. Now, you've welcomed Christian Wakeford, the former Conservative MP, into the Labour Party with open arms this week. Your former shadow cabinet colleague, John McDonnell, who's obviously still a Labour MP and very much a party grandee these days, if I can put it that way, he told Times Radio on Friday that he wasn't pleased that Christian Wakeford had joined Labour. He highlighted some of his past statements and policy positions. He said Christian Wakeford's defection was a political stunt, and he called for a by-election in Bury. What do you make of that?
What I'd say is that he, the Labour Party is obviously always a coalition on the left, and just as the Conservative Party is a coalition on the right. But but given what's been happening in the Conservative Party, and given the bullying that the MP for Bury South was subjected to, and given that he has, no matter what differences anyone might have with him, he's always stood up for the people of Bury South. Then the question is, what does he do? What does he do in the face of such bullying? He had to continue to stand up for his constituents, and he felt he had no choice but to cross the floor. And of course, we welcome him. And in the end, what we need to do is we need to win power at the next general election, and we need to persuade people who voted Conservative last time that actually the best possible government for this country is Labour, and we ask for the opportunity to serve.
But surely the voters in Bury South who elected a Tory MP should now have a say now that they have a Labour MP.
It's an interesting thing within our constitution as to whether or not that happens. I mean, on the whole, it just doesn't. And I think one of the reasons for that is because you have someone's name and the political party on a ballot paper. I mean, listen, when I've rebelled against my party in the past, for example, I rebelled against Tony Blair's 90 days legislation. Before I did that, I had to think, to whom was I accountable? I was obviously accountable to the Labour Party nationally and locally, but I was also accountable to my constituents to do the right thing. And in the end, I was also accountable to my conscience.
Let's talk about these Downing Street parties or work events or whatever we're calling them at the moment. We're all expecting this report this week on what actually happened. Do you think that Sue Gray, a civil servant who works for the government, is suitably independent to rule on this?
But we are where we are, right? I mean, obviously, she's a civil servant, and therefore she's not in a position to be able to make recommendations. I recommend that the Prime Minister resign is not going to be within the remit of her investigation. She's there to make a factual finding as to what it is that has happened. But those who say that it's an independent investigation, it's not quasi-judicial. This is not a retired High Court judge in the way that it quite often would be if you wanted to have a really independent investigation. But, she spent the last few weeks investigating it. I think we should wait and see what it is that she comes out with. I don't want to cast aspersions on her character or her standing. She has huge standing in Westminster, and I don't mean by anything that I say to denigrate that. But, she is in the position that she is, and I would suggest that when the report is published, she also publishes all the evidence that she was able to base it on, because there's also been, during discussions of Sue Gray's report and everybody anticipating it, there have been rumours, allegations that senior people at Number 10 have been advising junior colleagues to, quote, clean up their phones. And so how much information she will have had access to. I mean, I think by the sounds of it, she's had some access to some pretty shocking information. We hear today about information that points to a private party, not just at Number 10, but in Number 10's flat. And if that's right, then obviously that is pretty, just really, there's just nobody surely in the world who could then say that wasn't a party.
You're the Shadow Attorney General now, of course, and we've had over 1,500 cases of people being charged under the coronavirus legislation, according to the CPS. Now, there are campaigners saying that these should be withdrawn, annulled, pardoned, whatever, because of what we know now is going on within government. That seems fair, doesn't it?
It's a very difficult issue, and it's something actually that I raised with the Attorney General at Attorney General's Questions a couple of weeks ago, in which I said, there are magistrates who are doing their duty up and down the country now, prosecuting people or hearing cases where people have been prosecuted for breach of the rules, and yet how can the rule of law work if the law doesn't apply to everybody equally?
Would you like them to be
for
pardoned
example,
now? Do you want them to be pardoned? What should we do
I
about
think
them?
I personally think if you breach the law, you've breached the law. And I think what I would call for is for everyone to be treated equally. So, so just as I think there was a woman who turned up somewhere with a birthday card, I think, and to deliver it, and then didn't realise that she was walking in on a party. It's difficult to know what the difference between her is and the Prime Minister who claims that the party of 100 people in the building in which he lives, where the invitation was and came from his personal secretary, walked in on a party, didn't know it had happened. I mean, I don't understand why he's not prosecuted if this other woman is. It is a question of fairness under the law. And that doesn't mean that everyone should be able to breach the law. It means that no one should be allowed to breach the law, and everyone should be prosecuted who breaches it.